Hello and welcome to NARC Live on Wednesday the 17th of August 2022, coming to you live from Norfolk on the east coast of England with Tammy M0TC.
Hello.
And me, David G7URP. Lovely to see you. On tonight's show, we find out about a special project to put a radio system in a box, especially for difficult to get to islands. International Lighthouse Weekend is this Saturday and Sunday. And we find out what on earth this is. But first, fantastic news for you, for contesters especially in the group, but I'm sure for the whole club who'll be very proud, because Norfolk Amateur Radio Club has set a new record in its contesting activity by winning every one of the 18 multi-mode club championships in 2022. This resulted in an overall win by a large margin of 68.8 thousand points over Bristol Contest Group, who were in second place. Our final score was only 9.9 thousand points behind the formidable 3A's Contest Group winners of the general section. NARC takes part in the local club section, whereby all participants must be within a set radius, as opposed to the general section, where they can be located anywhere throughout the UK. Some 28 club members participated at some stage throughout the contest, with typically 15 to 20 logs per contest. And here is the certificate that we've got, and the people that were on that certificate we've put on the side here as well. And it's also been notable that several of the NARC contesters have improved their positions during the recent years and appear further up the tables, with some in leading positions. Some 10 members of the NARC team appear in the first 50 stations out of 473 overall participants, covering both general and local club sections. So it's congratulations to everyone who's taken part in this to bring the club. I know that we talk about it a lot, it's in the newsletter every week, but look at what a result to become top in the country, winning every single one. Congratulations both from Malcolm G3PDH as the club president and from me, as of course as club chairman as well. Really well done, and congratulations and thank you to all of those people who took part. Yeah, absolutely.
Mini round of applause.
If we had a round of applause button, we would press it now. Well done. Now, Haysborough Lighthouse, because this weekend is the International Lighthouse Weekend, which is a weekend celebrated actually throughout the world, and it's not just for radio amateurs, it just celebrates lighthouses that are coming together. And for some years now, amateur radio clubs have been traditionally activating them by working from them. But we haven't been able to do that for the last 2 years because of COVID. But this weekend we are going back to Haysborough Lighthouse, which is the lighthouse we normally activate. We can show you the QSL card here actually as well. So it's to commemorate the many years of lighthouse and lightship operations around the world and the Association of Maritime Radio Communications. First thing Saturday, we'll install and operate an HF station using CW and SSB throughout the daytime over the whole weekend, as well as a VHF station which is just for Saturday. The station will be operated from within the lighthouse, and the public will be attending the open day on Sunday the 21st. Well, Malcolm G3PDH has drawn up a roster, and there's still a bit of space, but if you want a full slot, please contact Malcolm. His details are on the club newsletter, his email address. And if you are wanting just to come and casually have a look in, we definitely recommend you do that on the Saturday, because on the Sunday it's open to the public. People are charged as well to come in and go up and everything, whereas if you actually come on the Saturday, you'll be able to see the radio station and everything within the lighthouse, with just amateur radio club members there on the Saturday. So please do that, and we look forward to seeing you. And also from a fellow club in the area, Kings Lynn Amateur Radio Club, this is from Mike M0XXM, their chairman. They'll be activating the Hunstanton Lighthouse using the call sign GB2HLH, and again this weekend. Everyone is welcome to join us. You don't need to be a Kings Club member, so you could do a sort of little round trip tour, I think, around the Norfolk coast there. Their station will be found on the cliffs adjacent to the lighthouse, or of course you can work them on the radio, where most modes will be tried on VHF and HF. More details from the Kings Lynn Club website at klarc.org.uk. And of course, they're hoping to work us as well in all of that. So some good activity there for Lighthouses on the Air weekend this weekend. Now, Norfolk Amateur Radio Club is also hoping to put on a station excuse me, for SSB Field Day on the 3rd and 4th of September. It's still yet to be confirmed. It's really just about how many people volunteer, but a lot of people have already come forward, and we hope that there will be enough people to let it go ahead. Now, this is an SSB contest, so it's an ideal, especially for those of you not into Morse, or you're just starting out in the hobby and you want to see what contesting is all about, or how a field station is put together. So we hope you might be interested in that. The setup of the tower will be on Friday afternoon and evening, and that's organised by Chris G0DWV and Andy M0NKR. And the other setup will be on Saturday, and it goes for 24 hours between the Saturday and the Sunday for the contest. And we'll be pulling it down on the Sunday, of course. If you'd like to volunteer to either help put the station up, take it down, or operate at any time, again, please contact Malcolm G3PDH. Again, his email address is on the newsletter and also on the club website. Now, we've got some news for you from people sending it in to us. Thank you very much. Firstly, to Paul G3VPT, because he says he's found another use for an antenna mast that you may find rather different. He had a wire netting fence that's seen better days, but the metal post was still in pretty good condition. The mast was a 30-foot, 3-section triangular, which he stripped down from a mast and used the verticals to support the top and bottom for the 6-foot, 1-metre fence panels. It took time, but it's now dog-proof when we have our daughter's dog when she comes over someday. That's from Paul G3VPT. Thanks for the pictures, Paul.
That's
Massive
nice.
garden there, isn't it? It's lovely.
Yeah, lovely.
Looks really good. And Bob G6PWS has also responded to our plea for some news as well, because he's been to win. You may remember Bob was a lorry driver, and he does, I still think, the odd bits of work and things. And he went to collect a boat from Golfe Juan, Antipodes in France. I think I appreciate your pronunciation will be better than mine. But anyway, at the beginning of August, it was very, very, very hot, he says. This picture shows the picture loaded for him to deliver to Porthmadog in Wales. And there's a picture here, I think, of the just across the bay. You can just make out the Festiniog and Welsh Highland train. And here's a picture, which is a bit random, I suppose, but this is a picture that he also sent us, and he thinks the caption for this, it should be, "Should I tell him or will you?" Hasn't got the wrapper on that one.
No. Has it got a joke?
I don't know. Do they still have jokes on them? Anyway, Bob, thank you ever so much for sharing those pictures with us. I've been covering for Tammy while she did something to one of the cameras, actually. So thanks very much for that. Well covered. I even pressed the button on there. You know, years and years and years ago, I wouldn't be able to do that. I'd have had to walk out. Yeah. Anyway, we don't want to get political, do we? But well, anyway, that was the case.
Oh,
was a spider, was it?
Over the camera.
Really?
I thought it was something on the TV, but it kept moving.
Okay. Not as bad as the one that landed here, though.
No, we don't talk about that.
I won't talk about that. Final bit of news is kind of from me, or from us, really. If you read the club newsletter in the last week or so, you'll see that we've got the call sign GB100BBC. That's me, not the club, but I thought it's something that would interest you. It's really been something rather out of my comfort zone. You probably know that I don't get on the radio very much, don't really have much time or opportunity. And the thought of even setting up a special event station just myself was quite difficult. But I did it with the help of Tammy and Kevin M0UJD, because I'm a member of the BBC radio group, which used to be called the Aerial Radio Group many years ago. It's open to people who work for or did work for the BBC at any time if they're radio amateurs. And this year, of course, is the centenary of the BBC, 100 years. And we've got the call sign GB100 BBC for all of this week, from last weekend right until Friday night. And instead of just working that call sign traditionally from the shack, where there's one at the top of Broadcasting House, for example, in London, G8BBC runs from there, they wanted to spread it out around the country as much as they could. So it can either be run from BBC premises, or it can be run from a member's house or a member's QTH. Unfortunately, only the member can actually do the transmitting, communicating, which is quite hard, as I found on the weekend. I'm still suffering from not much voice, I think. But anyway, it's been great fun. Just to tell you then, so this is still running now until Friday. And this is some of the things we did. We have got a tower near us, and it's very rarely used. And I don't think I've ever done this. But as you can see, Kevin's helping. Well, doing more than that, really. He's doing a heck of a lot of it there. For those of you interested, this is an X6000 collinear bought for the job. It's 270 and 1.3 gigs. And that's it up again. Now, you'll notice that as well as the collinear right at the top, on the right, there's a wire hanging down. Because I wanted to know what best antenna to put up for HF for over the weekend. And I asked our antenna expert, or one of our antenna experts, I'm sure you'll agree, is Steve, G0KYA, what would he do? And he said an end-fed half-wave 8010 would be the best all-round sort of antenna to put up. So that was, you could just see it in the distance there, the mast. And then what you can see here is something that Kevin's got, an ex-Army surplus mast, which we've put up to suspend that area of. What Steve told me was try and get the middle of that end-fed half-wave antenna as near as sort of 30 or 40 feet as possible, because that's where most of the power is. That's where the current is. And that's where we're going to get out. And there's the top of the antenna there. I just thought I'd share this with you because if you know me, you'll know I don't get out and do radio stuff. I hopefully organise quite a lot of things for the club, but I don't get involved with this sort of hands-on. So this was really out of my comfort zone. But as they say, if I could do it, along with my help from Tammy and Kevin, then maybe you could have a go as well. Now this is a couple of views from the shack that we've run from inside. We set up quite a bit of space. We were working on HF and VHF, UHF and 23 cents. There's our Cat Denver just disappearing past the BBC clock there, that we had to log everything in UTC and had to do it especially so Kevin was able to log for me, because it had to be done on a special online page for this as part of the conditions of the BBC radio group. I guess I was working on VHF or UHF there for that. We've got another picture I think as well, Tammy. That's you and me working as well in the same shack. We did work quite unusual things, and that was one of the other things about bringing it to Norfolk, because the club call sign has been used all year. This special event call sign has been used all year from various parts of the UK. So I wanted to do something different. I knew most of you who wanted to work a call sign would have worked it, but working from Norfolk I thought was quite nice, because it means that we could work things like VHF and UHF and even 1.3 gigs simplex from being out here, instead of if it was very London centric. So that's what we focused on. And we did work quite a few contacts. We also joined the Koblenz Sked on Saturday morning at 10 o'clock local time and went in on that as well. Anyway, that's enough about it. The only thing I would tell you, that as an experience, and again, someone who doesn't use the radio a lot, certainly not as much as those contesters who got those wonderful points for us. The one thing that I think threw me, if there was one thing of nothing else, is the varying use of the phonetic alphabet, which I've got as the pretty standard one because I'm involved with training, and that's the one we teach, Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta. But when lots of people were coming back on pile-ups with various versions of the phonetics, it didn't help me at all. In fact, I had to manually sort of in my head decipher it and work out what was, I don't know, umbrella or mother or whatever, Mexico and things like that, because, I'd be used to thinking of the traditional ones. So that was a bit of experience that I shared, but it's been a wonderful experience. And maybe this will inspire some of you, if you are involved with an organisation or a club or something, where you could put on a special event. Because as they say, if I can do it, anyone can do it, along with a bit of help, of course, as well from Kevin and Tammy. And thanks to Steve again for that advice about the antenna as well. So it's been good fun. If you want to work GB100 BBC and you haven't already, you've still got time, because I've got the call until Friday evening. So if you want to drop me a line to say a particular time and a particular mode, we'll try and work you. Most of it's been on voice, but there we are, radio@dcpmicro.com. I've got it. It's been a real privilege to do it, but I got it as much for you guys, so that there's a chance to work something that you may not be able to normally work if the call sign's coming from somewhere else. So it's been a really interesting activity, and hopefully that's helped some of you as well to get that call sign. Do contact me though. Friday night is the last, a minute to midnight. It's the very last time I can use that call sign from here. After all those words,
you're still talking a lot, aren't you?
I'm still talking a lot, but I'm now handing to you. Yeah, I nearly lost my voice. Did I mention that? Yeah. Anyway, over to you for little people. Yeah. Thanks.
Here's the little people this week. We're going to be a little bit retro this week.
Oh, do you know what that thing is?
A bicycle.
No, what it's made of.
Plastic?
Don't show me up again. Oh, no.
No, I know
Go on,
I know what a cassette tape is.
Right, good. Thank goodness.
And you have your pencil.
Oh, yeah, I've told you about that, haven't I?
Well, I know.
Did you know about that?
We did have cassette tapes
You're
when
not-
I was young.
I'm not so old then. Great. Anyway, that's lovely. As you can see, that's our little people for this week. Tammy's little people. She chooses this. And it's miniature-calendar.com, a different picture every day. And Tammy picks one for us. So really good retro, that. Thanks very much, Tammy. So what have you been doing? We won't be meeting next week, but we're meeting the week after. So in 2 weeks' time, we've had another NARC Live. We'd love to hear from you about pictures of the radio stuff and projects or anything else that you've been doing. Just drop us a couple of pictures and a few words. We'd love to feature it. This is how we keep in touch with each other at the club. Just send them to the usual address, radio@dcpmicro.com, at the bottom of your screens now. So now, before we meet our guests for tonight's main event, it's time for that competition. The competition that we set you a couple of weeks ago, a little bit unusual, really. Can we remind ourselves what that competition is, Tammy?
We can.
What on earth is this? I hope you can make it out from that picture, but it was on the newsletter and on our website. Well, I won't say anymore because I think everybody who entered it, and there's quite a few people, will explain what that is as we go along. Starting off with Ken, M6KRC, who says it seems to be a fly on a whippy ice cream with a cherry on the top and a drone flying in clouds above it.
Bruce G4KZT, I think this picture is of the sculpture on the 4th plinth in Trafalgar Square. It is quite bizarre.
Simon M0SIH, this item shown on what on earth is this is whipped cream, drone and fly sculpture. It was created by Heather Williamson and was originally on the 4th plinth in Trafalgar Square, London.
Tom G8XQD, that is amazing. A drone with 3 of the rotors lined up. Shame the fly scream with the cherry on top got in the way, or we might have seen all 4 blades were lined up.
Bob G6PWS, a giant dollop of ice cream with a cherry on the top of the latest modern art installation on the 4th plinth. An organic fly and a modern fly, a drone, adorn the ice cream which slumps slightly melted over the plinth.
Nev M0NFY, this week's What on Earth is an easy one as it's not a sewing machine.
Yeah, if we said what it isn't, I mean, that would take ages. Steve G3VA thinks it's a sculpture in Trafalgar Square, possibly.
John G0MXN, what are we supposed to be looking for? The model ice cream, the insect, or the artificial cherry being attacked by what looks like a drone? Or the orange and red balloons in the background, such as the Spanish love at fiestas? I give up.
Sounds a bit frustrated with that. Mike G8EY says, according to the ABC News, it is giant ice cream sculptor, unveiled in London. A giant swirl of whipped cream with a cherry on top, as well as a fly and a drone.
Paul G3VPT is at the ice cream and fly at Trafalgar Square.
Oh, I've got real flies in here, that's all I do know. Paul G3VPT, John 2E0TWQ says, it looks like a giant ice cream cornet like they have at a theme park with a giant fly in the ice cream and a drone has crashed on top of it and a cherry on top. Hi, hi.
Chris G0TZZ, just by fluke, I happened to be in Trafalgar Square, London, just after the question was raised, so I took a picture of the plaque under the item in question. Regards to all. So we can reveal this is Chris's picture.
It's right. That picture on the left is the plaque, and it does indeed confirm that it's Heather Williamson's.
Phillipson, I think it is.
Is it? I thought it was Heather Williamson.
Phillipson.
Oh, Phillipson. I beg your pardon. It's her sculpture, and it's been there for 2 years. But what Tammy doesn't know is that I found out, and there is a camera that was being mounted in that drone, and you've been able to look at it.
Yeah.
Until Monday, because on Monday it was taken away.
Was it?
It was. Unfortunately, This is no longer there.
Oh.
So if this has inspired you to go to London and have a good look at this thing,
don't go.
Don't go. We took the original picture. I have to share with you. You may remember we went to see the ladies' football, and we went to Trafalgar Square, and this thing was there. I mean, it's huge. I know it doesn't look big next to Nelson's column there, but I mean, it is massive. And honestly, we looked at each other and said, "What's that?" And we just thought it was maybe a nice bit of fun for the summer. What on earth is this? So thanks for all of your entries, indeed. But it's gone. It is called The End, and it is the end in a way because it disappeared on Monday. So let's have a look at our new competition. What on earth is this? Now, we have blacked out a couple of words because we don't want to give it away and make it easy for you. It's one of those things that I've been saying we want because we do want some more, guys. We're running out now a little bit. We've got a few left, but this is a true gadget, I think we'd agree. I mustn't say any more than that, except it's probably topical right now. Would that be fair? Is that giving too much away? Just to say it's topical at this time.
Yeah, I guess so, yeah.
Okay, that's all I'm going to tell you. What do you think this gadget is? If you've got one, it'll be easy, but if you haven't, it's your chance to work out what that is for.
I want one. I want to work out where I can get one.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I think most people would want one of these.
Yeah.
Anyway, mustn't say any more, mustn't make it easy for you. We will reveal what that is in 2 weeks' time. Meantime, send your answers to radio@dcpmicro.com by 3 o'clock on Wednesday week, and we'll reveal what that is. And, as I said, if you've got anything like that lying around the cupboard, a kitchen gadget or whatever, all those K-Tel and Ronco things and all those years ago, that sort of thing, then please let us have a picture of them. Ideally one with it like this, and then maybe one with it in use. We do tend not to use ones of just one-off things that people have made for themselves unless they can be worked out what they are. Because quite honestly, after doing these competitions now for over 2 years, we find if it's not at all workable out, then people don't enter. And that's all. Anyway, thank you very much indeed for that. Just a quick time then before we meet our guests, to go through the club news, what's happening this week. On Sunday, it's the GB2RS News at 7 o'clock on GB3MB. On Monday night, it's the Monday Night Net, again on GB3MB at 7:30. And at 8:30, the 80-metre CW Net on 3.543 megahertz. And then next Wednesday, the 24th of August, we're meeting at CNS School for a social informal between 7 and 9 in the study hall there. There will be signs out for that. And of course, we'll be back here in 2 weeks' time for a talk on Ham Radio Deluxe. So that's what's happening on NARC Live in 2 weeks, but next Wednesday we'll meet back at the school. But please let us have your stories and your what on earth is this and all those sort of things as well. Keep sending them while we're away, because we do look at them all and we use most of them in the show as well. Just send them to this address, radio@dcpmicro.com, and please keep in touch with that. And also, by the way, for this club card, of course, which we still send out, we sent 2 out yesterday, I think, actually, to members of another club, in fact, another radio club. Someone asked us to send these to them. So it doesn't matter who they are, where they are in the world, we will send this card. It's a club card. We add your name to ours and send it to anybody who you think will be cheered by one of those cards. Now, especially with the weather being so nice, it makes you think about doing radio and things outside, doesn't it? But it makes you think about expeditions and de-expeditions, and they could be pretty tricky things. And while some of them are maybe fairly straightforward to get container loads worth of stuff, especially to islands and things, it's not always an easy challenge. So tonight we've got 2 guests who are going to tell us about a particular project that they've been working on, which is called a RIB. It's not as I originally thought when I first saw it though, a rigid inflatable boat. A RIB stands for Radio in Box. And it's a really special project which Hal W8HC and Gregg W6IZT have been involved with. So good evening to you, both of you.
Yeah, good evening, David. Good evening, Tammy. Good to see you. Good to be here with your group. Thank you for having us.
Pleasure. Well, it's our pleasure. Thank you very much indeed for this tonight. We're really looking forward to it. Now, as always with this, just to let you know that this is live. And so if you're watching this live on Wednesday evening, then please ask questions and comments and things like that. We'll read them to Hal and Gregg at the end. But now we're going to hand back to you for your presentation, and we'll talk to you again at the end. Hal and Gregg.
Okay, David, thank you. And I will kick things off and get through maybe 10 or 11 slides, and I'll do hopefully a smooth handoff to Gregg there. And just as a little background, Gregg and I have participated in several expeditions and other operating activities together. He lives down in Georgia, and I am located in West Virginia. And we've actually began our friendship with the 3Y0Z buffet attempt in 2018. So Gregg and I have got to be really, really close friends. I consider him a brother, and it's been an honor for me to work with him on this project, which is actually the brainchild of George Wallner, Alpha 7 Japan Victor, who lives down in Miami. And we'll introduce you to George here in a moment. His sidekick, Mike Snow, KN4EEI, And of course, Greg has been actively involved in this project. I have been tangentially involved in some of the operating activities that we have done down in the Bahamas at C6AGU, which is George's, that's his call sign down there. And Warren Merkel, KD4Z, who's come on board here in the last year or so with some of the control system development and the expertise that he offers writing code with the Code Red situation. So with that, let's go ahead and proceed to the next slide, Greg. So as alluded to by David, the RIB project, it's actually being sponsored by the Northern California DX Foundation and with participation from Flex Radio. And you'll see why that is with the configuration in the box. But this is being done in an effort to enable future DX activities from some of the rare island entities, some of the rare DXCC entities, and perhaps there might be some opportunities with some other applications with this. So that's the basic underlying, how this thing is being funded and sponsored. Go ahead, Greg.
I'm working on it, Hal. There you go.
Okay. As Dave said, RIB stands for Radio in a Box. What it is, as you'll see, it's a complete remotely operated kilowatt station that serves to make DXpeditions more eco-friendly. And this concept eliminates the need to camp on an island. And as you'll see, it would make DXpedition logistics a lot more simple. And so before I get into the why, I do want to state what it's not. And there's been some people, they have the concept that this is like a go box. So there's a lot of people that have go boxes for emergencies, or if they're going to do summits on the air or whatever. It's not a go box. This is a major application of something that would be quite useful at an island DXpedition. And although I guess it could be utilized as a go box, it's not something that most people would consider to do that. But so the question becomes then, what's the driver behind this? Why was it felt that there was a need for this? And so Greg, if you'll advance the slide, for guys like Greg and myself who are DXpeditioners and DXers, we're always looking at Club Log's 25 most wanted list. And this is the August list that we updated. And as you look down the top 25 most wanted DXCC entities, go ahead and click the forward button there. It should pop up I just want to say that all of these top 25 are have restricted access, which means you have to have some kind of authorization to get there and operate. 22 of these 25 top 25 are either islands, they're atolls, rocks, or they're reefs. And many, and actually most of these are protected entities. And so it makes it extremely difficult at times to access, therefore. So go ahead. And so in order to do this, we have what we call getting the yes. You have to jump through hoops. You have to send applications. You have to get all the authorizations, to get the accreditations. In other words, the required permission with landing permits, the license. And this really, for guys like Greg and myself and other DXpeditioners, this is where the challenge is. And they come from different sources within the process of the entity's parent. In other words, the actual government that regulates or owns that particular entity. And, you can get pushback, or you've got to go through requirements with their government. their military, in some cases, the Environmental Oversight Agency or multiple agencies, and some include private governing agencies or bodies. And it could be a combination of any of these, but just know that for those of us that are trying to activate the rare DX entities, there's a lot of pre-work that needs to be done. And so that therefore it becomes the challenge. So, Greg, if you would please. So the bottom line, and Greg and I have seen this in the last 5 years, and probably even more so post-COVID. The bottom line is it's getting more and more difficult to access many of these DXCC entities. And, you know, I could sit here and give you examples. I won't bore you with details, but it's getting more difficult to get to these top 25 entity locations, of which 22 of them are islands. Go ahead, Greggy. Okay, now I mentioned a little bit of who was involved with this. So here's some background. George A7JV, he designed and built the first two first generation ribs back in 2019. He did some testing of the rib solution back in the Bahamas using ribs on an island down there that he's quite familiar with, and setting up a remote operation from one of his boats. In 2020, the Northern California DX Foundation sponsored the construction of 6 ribs. So they had agreed with George that they would underwrite all necessary to build these ribs, which you will see here in just a moment. So the testing on this solution continues today. You know, Greg has been actively involved. He was in the Bahamas with George a couple months ago on some additional testing. You know, trying to prove the scalability, the reliability, and performance of the rib solution, and so we have even gone so far in the last couple years to expand our efforts with the rapid deployment and the footprint of our antenna systems. And, you know, we can talk more about that here in a bit. So go ahead, Greg. Let's advance. But the bottom line is the rib is not really that different from your home station. It consists of a radio, which in this case, we're using the Flex 6000 series, a 1.5 kilowatt LD MOS amplifier, antennas. We have antennas involved in this. We're using a network, an Ethernet, wireless Wi-Fi, and internet access, and a power source. And all of this within the rib, it's housed in a modular, weatherproof, and environmentally controlled enclosure, which you will see is a pretty unique and effective design on trying to control the temperature inside that enclosure at some of these locations, especially down in the Bahamas where it can get quite warm. Greg can talk more to that. So go ahead, Greg.
Okay, thank you, Hal. And thank you, everyone, for having us on this afternoon. We do greatly appreciate it. So this is a picture of the rig in the box. That's George AA7JV on the left. He's quite an accomplished inventor and entrepreneur. I'll go as far as to say, without going into detail, that each of you probably has one or more of his inventions within arm's reach of where you're sitting right now. So we'll just leave it at that. But quite an interesting guy, a lot of fun to work with. This has just been a real amazing project to be part of. So simply stated, looking at a block diagram, we've got the rib, which is on the island. We've migrated away from large, full-size resonant antennas to using smaller footprint, rapid deployment antennas that can be deployed by one person. And these antennas are matched with a remote tuner that is co-located with the antenna. We also have configurations where on the low bands we have receive antennas, and there is a backup battery involved. So the concept is minimizing the footprint on the island and having the operators operate the radio from the boat. And from the boat to the radio, we're employing a 900 megahertz Ethernet bridge radio. It's got about 60 or 70 megabits of bidirectional throughput, enough to support 6 or more ribs simultaneously. The power for each of the ribs is from a Honda generator, and supporting the generator is a 5-gallon fuel tank, which is siphon fed, and you'll see a picture of how that's set up here in a little bit. So this is a picture of George on his boat. You can see the island in the background, and we're probably operating one of the contests. I can see by the screens that are up. This is probably CQ Worldwide from last year or the year before, Worldwide CW. This, actually, I can look at the screen on the PC and see the control system is the original control system that we had in place, which has since been replaced by a control system that we have developed within the team. So very comfortable, minimizes the impact on the island, and we're hoping that it is a mechanism, a way to work around some of the concerns that the governing bodies of these protected entities are faced with. So here's a block diagram. The heart of the system, the data acquisition and control system, originally was a commercial product that was based on a platform called Daisy Lab. And Daisy Lab was proprietary. It had to be, each unit had to be licensed. There was a fee associated with it. And it was a significant contributor of cost to the RIB solution. About a year ago, as Hal alluded, Warren KD4Z came on board. I've known Warren for a number of years. And George had challenged us with, let's replace this Daisy Lab system with something that gives us a little bit more functionality, better aligns with what our needs are, and it gets rid of the cost element the Daisy Lab system has. So there is a programming environment, I guess a high-level programming environment that was developed by IBM called Node-RED. Some of you may be familiar with Node-RED. It's very popular in the flex radio circles, where folks are interfacing it to their flex radio and automating a number of different station functions. But it basically controls power, push to talk, monitors SWR, voltages, current. It's really the heart of the system. And it's based on a Raspberry Pi 4 with an analog to digital hat that goes on top that takes care of the analog monitoring, since the Pi doesn't have native analog inputs. So starting at the lower left-hand corner, we obviously have our generator. We have a filter system to take out any hash that might be generated by the generator. And it directly powers the two supplies, a 12-volt supply for the radio and a 50-volt supply for the PA. And this little red block is some of George's secret sauce, if you will. It is a 40 farad capacitor. That's 40 million microfarad. And what this capacitor bank does is it stores enough energy to smooth out the throttling of the generator when we're going from key up to key down on CW or from transmit to receive on digital modes. And it not only makes life much easier for the generator, but because the generator is not throttling so quickly, it significantly reduces the fuel consumption. We're thinking that we're getting about 30 to 35% reduction in fuel consumption, which is significant when you look at operating this, say, over the course of 3 or 4 weeks on a remote island. There are two cooling systems. The PA is directly water cooled. There's a copper spreader that's utilized, and under the copper spreader is tubing that sprays to it, and we run cooling water through that. And then there's a heat exchanger inside of the rib, which removes heat from inside the rib and moves it to the outside, and I'll show you a picture of that in a little bit. So this is a real good shot of the rib, and so from right to left, we've got the two power supplies. and appropriate fusing and distribution, power distribution. The 40 farad capacitor bank. This fan is the fans for the internal cooling of the rib. So any heat that's generated within the enclosure is transferred to the water, pumped outside of the enclosure, and there's another heat exchanger that sits outside the enclosure and dissipates the heat from the system. Water-cooled PA. This is based on kits from a Russian ham, and his online presence is EB104. So George bought these, modified them to be fit for purpose for this application, and then built them. And it's all on an open frame, so it is very well cooled. And the water cooling system on the PA is just amazing. The rate at which the heat is dissipated and removed from the copper heat spreader is pretty significant, and much better than the commercial air-cooled amps that we're familiar with. So on the bottom here below this aluminum enclosure is a Flex 6700. In the enclosure is where the DAC is located, so all of our control systems, power supplies for the Pi and for other subsystems are located in here as well. Ethernet switch, you've got Ethernet going to the radio, you've got Ethernet going to the Pi, we call it the Pi DAC. There are applications where we'll put a PC in here for remote access, so we have an Ethernet connection for the PC, and those are industrial hardened PCs that are rated for operation up to 7 degrees C. And then you can see the water cooling lines that exit out the back and the left side of the rib enclosure. So a little bit about the footprint. I got involved with this, and Hal did at the same time, back in late 2020. And we made a trip to an island near Eleuthera in the Bahamas, an uninhabited island, and we set up our contest station. And in 2020, we had 5 antennas. These were switched vertical dipole array antennas. They were quite large. Took 4 of us to put each antenna up. Took us probably longer than a day to complete it. We came back a few months later for CQWPX single sideband, and we reduced our footprint to 2 antennas. And we stuck with this 2 antenna model because we had 2 ribs on this particular trip, and found out that these antennas that you would think of as being maybe performance marginalized because of their size and the fact that they're not resonant, they're tuned, really doesn't matter much when you're setting them next to salt water. So even a small antenna that might be 30% efficient over normal earth in your yard or your garden would be 85 or 95% efficient when sitting next to salt water. Another benefit of using these antennas with the tuner on the antenna is that the tidal action, because the antennas are so close to the water, actually changes the tuning of the antenna. And without an antenna tuner at the antenna, it's difficult to chase the SWR, if you will, making it very difficult to operate. So, we found a good balance of performance, ease of deployment. The antennas we're using now, one person can put together an antenna in 10 minutes. And Hal and I tested this particular antenna in St. Martin last year. We were really impressed with how well it worked. And then we kind of brought it along with us to the Bahamas last fall. And George and Mike were setting up the ribs, and Hal and I put this antenna together in about 5 minutes, and everybody was quite amazed at how quickly it went up, how easily it went up, and how well it worked. So here's George and Mike, and that's one of George's boats in the background. And this is a complete station. This is, you got your coax, your tools, everything you need to deploy a kilowatt station on a remote island. And the benefit of us going out and doing contests is we're all contesters, we enjoy it, but it's the best way for us to simulate how the radios will be used and how well they'll perform in a multi-transmitter de-expedition environment. So it's kind of like ringing out the solution end to end and so it's tested as a system. And we made some advancements. We're continually making incremental improvements and looking at ways to reduce costs, improve performance, reduce deployment time and teardown time. And we're getting pretty close to what we believe is going to be a really great and optimal solution for de-expeditions, not only now, but into the future. Oops, went the wrong way. Okay, so I wanted to take some time to do a comparison. And we refer to the traditional way, the mega de-expedition to an island sort of format, as tent city. When you go to one of these uninhabited islands, you need to set up sleeping quarters, common area. You need to dig a latrine. You need to have a cooking area. And it takes a lot of time to set this up. This was actually the materials that we took to Beauvais with us. But what's not included in this picture is I think there were 6 tents that we were going to use, and they were already on boat in Argentina. So this is most of what we took, but not all of it. And if you look at it packed, this is a 40-foot cargo container. And you can see it's quite full of stuff. We've got fence posts, aluminum masts, antennas, chairs, cots, tables, power, all sorts of things in here. And the total weight that was shipped was just under 25,000 pounds. Quite a big mess. And in contrast, the modular approach with the rib, since we're not setting up camp on the island, we're able to reduce the weight by almost 95%. And 2 people can do basically any operation that's required to set up the antennas and the equipment. So we don't need a bunch of people holding ropes on tents and standing up tent poles and tying things down. It's really turned into a huge advancement in the way that we're going to approach these things. So this is what the rib looks like with the external coolers. Actually, you can see both coolers. One cooler is for the internal with the 4 fans, and then the smaller heat exchanger is for directly cooling the pallet in the LDMOS amplifier. And it's not bad duty if you can get it. It's warm, the water's nice. It's actually an amazing experience to be part of this. It's an understatement. So here's a couple ribs set up. We try to set them up in some foliage to eliminate the heat loading from the sun. It makes a fair bit of difference. Set them up on tables so they're easy to work on, so we're not down on our knees. And we're very careful to keep sand and salt out of the ribs. So all the connectors are capped. We keep clean water on the island when we're working to rinse our hands off, and all to minimize the effects of the sand getting into the equipment or salt corrosion, which is going to occur over time, but there's a lot you can do to minimize that. So here is a generator station for 2 ribs. Basically, the generators hold almost 4 liters of fuel. We fill the generator tank. These tanks on the table hold about 20 liters, 18 or 20 liters of fuel. And as the fuel is burned out of the tank, it siphons the fuel out of the tanks on the table. It works very well. We can run the generators for over 24 hours, which means that 1 person or 2 people only have to make 1 trip to the island a day to refuel. Those of you familiar with the Honda generators know that they have a mode called eco mode. And eco mode slows the idle down. It's not suitable for operation because the generator can't keep up with the fluctuating power draw. But when we're not operating, putting in the eco mode, it reduces fuel consumption even further. So talked a little bit earlier about the PIDAC. And this was, I came back from one of the trips, and Warren and I put our heads together. We developed a functional specification, and Warren's a pretty brilliant software engineer. And he ran off, and I didn't hear from him for about 2 or 3 weeks. And then he says, I've got something ready that we need to show George. So this window right here is what the operator has on his PC. So this opens up in a browser. You just close the browser down and push it up to the top of the screen. So you've got power. In this case, the amplifier is turned off so that the power range is only up to 15 watts. The amplifier only takes about 10 watts to drive it to full output. You have your SWR. Most important is PA temperature. And then you've got these buttons on the left for push to talk. And there are basically alarm buttons. So if it turns yellow or turns red, you're drawing too much current, your SWR is too high. The amplifier will kick off line if the SWR gets too high. And so it's just a very small dashboard for the operator to have to pay attention to. Just the minimal, one focused on the job at hand, which is making contacts. Another capability of the Pi is that it sends alarm and system information to a cloud-based server. So we were operating last year and we had an amplifier kickoff. Well, I got a text message from Warren before I could walk from one side of the boat to the other to see what was going on, to tell me that we had an amplifier problem. So it's pretty cool in that respect. There's a larger panel that opens up that gives you more visibility into a number of different parameters. And then I thought I had one more in here, I guess I don't. So there's one more screen that I think I took out of this here. Basically, the analog inputs to the hat that interfaces to the Pi are each individually calibrated to each rib. So we know that the power levels are correct. We do frequency correction. So measure the power on the band, set the inputs up appropriately, go to the next band, it sets up another variable. And so the measuring capabilities is very accurate. And Warren's done just a real great job on this. So a little bit about the 900 megahertz radios. We had started off with using Yagis on the island and omnidirectional antennas on the boat. The thinking being is the boat rotates around the anchor, but it's always within the beam width of a Yagi antenna. We've since replaced the Yagi antennas on the island with another set of Omnis. And we found that there's significant improvement in performance. One of the things that you're challenged with in operating a point-to-point link over water is reflections. And when reflections arrive at one end or the other out of phase, it causes problems and causes errors. The radios have an over-the-air error correction capability. TCP does retransmissions. So it's robust, but we want to make sure that the underlying infrastructure of the radio system is working to the highest degree possible. When we went out in June, we stopped at a very small island for our first night, and George and Mike and I set up one rib and one antenna and operated field day. And so the next morning I got up and I was on the radio and I hear the anchor chain coming up and I hear the motors winding up and we're going off to go diving somewhere. Well, we went about 5.5 miles away and the radio link was 100%. I was continuing to make contacts and George came down and I said, "You got to move the boat farther away. It's still working." So, a little bit of fun. We get to do some diving and stuff while we're out there and mix that in with the radio work, if you will. So the picture I showed you earlier about the tent city crammed into the cargo container, the contrast between the modular approach of the rib and the tent city approach, we really started getting our heads wrapped around this in the last 6 months. And prior to a presentation I gave at Dayton, I put together some cost comparisons to further demonstrate the value proposition of the rib. So, and it starts, when you start the expedition, you start collecting materials in a storage area and so on and so forth. And you take them out and you rearrange them, you put them back in. There's a lot of handling of equipment. On a rib expedition, we would probably ship the ribs by air freight. as opposed to putting them in a cargo container on a boat. That means that your equipment is out of your possession for a couple days at a time instead of 2, 3, 4 months or more. It reduces the staging time. I can't tell you the hundreds of man hours that went into preparing the logistics for the Beauvais trip. We have fewer boxes to handle, easier to set up. We've minimized the setup and teardown time significantly. We've taken about 75% of the time that it takes to set up a conventional expedition off the table. So we can do it 4 times as fast as the way it used to be done. And obviously less operator fatigue. You might notice that some of us are getting a little long in the tooth, and it's getting hard to do these trips. It's very exhausting. I've been on a number of trips to small islands, and I have not been on a trip yet where someone did not suffer the effects of heat exposure. It just happens, and you can get in a bad way real quick when you're in 120-degree temperatures and there's no shade, and you don't realize how far along you are in the heat exhaustion curve until you're too far gone, and it takes a good bit of time to recover sometimes, and it's quite dangerous. So I did some math, some pretty simple math, and did 2 hypothetical comparisons. It is a 6-man team using the modular approach for 28 days. Smaller team, longer duration is one of the approaches that we think is the way to go. Not only do you spend more time on the island, you're more likely to catch good propagation. It's really frustrating when you go someplace that's really rare and the band conditions are terrible for 7 days. You're only going to be there for 10 or 12 days. And compared it to a 12-man team for 14 days. So the same number of man days on the expedition. Obviously, to make the comparison as close as possible, it would have to be going to similar destinations. We're assuming that the final leg is by boat, which is almost always the case. The 6-man team has only 4 stations, and the 12-man team has 8 stations. But we're there twice as long. And, just obviously, there's some situations like going to Beauvais where you need a large team just to get your materials and equipment and stuff onto the island and dealing with all the nasty weather and things that a place like Beauvais throws at you. So just before the COVID outbreak, Hal and I were planning a trip to Chesterfield Reef, and we were progressing through the process of getting the approvals. And we had a boat that's been used quite often on DXpeditions is the Braveheart. It's since been sold, and it's somewhere in Argentina or Chile right now, as I understand it. So doing some comparisons, obviously if you have a team that's half the size, your airfare, your lodging is half the cost. The infrastructure, you're taking the tents out of the equation and everything else, cots, sleeping beds, all these things. So we take a lot of costs out there. These Honda generators are very fuel efficient. And since we have fewer stations, we need fewer generators. And it works out because we're there twice as long. The big difference is in the boat. Most charter boats, including the Braveheart, require a 50% deposit at the signing of the contract. A DXpedition doesn't start generating a lot of income until after they get back. So it presents a real challenge to meet the needs of the expedition when you're starting out and you have to write a check in the case of the Braveheart when we were going to Chesterfield for $175,000. We save a lot of money shipping the equipment. It's costing $22 about $20,000 to ship a container across the Pacific. So we're looking at the total expenses of a large team of almost $500,000. And a small team model, the expenses have been reduced to below $150,000. So quite a significant savings. So if we looked at the approaches, let's just say we took 2 smaller boats instead of 1 boat, you're still saving almost 50%. which is huge. It's getting harder to put these expeditions together. Fuel costs are significantly higher. The number of viable vessels available since COVID has diminished significantly. A lot of these folks who operated charters or dive boats, they didn't make it through the pandemic, and they're no longer in the business. So let's turn this around and look at this another way. So 12 operators for 14 days, 6 operators for 28 days. And it rolls down, and the number of on-island man days is the same. It takes about 36 man days. That's about 2.5 days of constant work to set up a tent city. And we can do it in 9 hours. Teardown is an equal improvement. Because we're taking less time to set up and tear down, we have more time to make contacts. A good operator on a de-expedition will typically make about 1,000 QSOs a day. So if you roll all these numbers down and break it down to the projected QSO total, we're making almost 50% more QSOs, and the QSO cost is less than half. One thing that I don't have a slide on here is that we took a Starlink terminal to the Bahamas with us when we went out in June. And this Starlink, if you're not familiar with it, is one of Elon Musk's ventures. And I was completely blown away with how well it works. We were seeing download speeds close to 200 megabits per second, upload speeds close to 80 megabits per second, and latency of about 50 milliseconds. That's compared to latency of a geostationary satellite of somewhere between 300 and 400 milliseconds. So I'm going to throw out there right now that moving forward, the de-expeditions who are pushing the cutting edge of technology and capabilities will be leveraging Starlink when it's available, and it's supposed to be globally deployed next year. And it's going to change the way that de-expeditions are conducted. We'll have the bandwidth to do real-time video. There'll be interactivity, and the technology would support remote access. So it's going to be a game changer. No promises of what's going to be utilized, but the technology supports taking the de-expedition from just being an entity to make some contacts to more where there's other aspects of the expedition that make it more exciting and more pleasurable and more engaging for the folks that are trying to work us. So we've kind of touched on all these. Minimum environmental impact, that's pretty easy to get your arms around. No one camping on the island. This slide started out from about 1.5 years ago when we were just starting to optimize the antenna configurations. So we can set up a station, have a station on the air from the time we leave the boat to having a station on the air in about 90 minutes. No time's wasted setting up tents, operator support, and infrastructure. We don't have to move operators back and forth from the boat. We don't have to move food. You can think about how dangerous or risky this can be when you've got a bunch of 60 and 70-year-old guys in a Zodiac, and they're trying to get on the beach, and waves are breaking, and they're trying to step over dead coral. It's not an easy situation. And so again, we're looking at smaller teams for longer durations. And maybe we do 2 weeks from one location and then go over to another location and set up again for another 2 weeks. So lower cost, minimal environmental impact, improved safety, and more efficiency. And for you guys on the other end of the pileup, you're going to be making more Qs with us. So we're continuing to work on this. It's really an interesting environment to develop in, because we don't over communicate when something needs to be done. Somebody figures it out, and then lay around one night, lay around bed, thinking through things, and get back and come up with a solution or a capability that meets that particular need. Then the 900 megahertz link performs extremely well. It's they tried 2.4 gigahertz, they tried 5 gigahertz, and we went back to 900 megahertz just because it's simply very robust. So thank you for the opportunity to present the solution to you today. And when Hal and I were doing some research, we're trying to get the concept of our Dayton presentation together, we discovered that 2023 is the 100th anniversary of amateur radio involvement in expeditions. I forget the guy's name, Hal probably remembers, but it's an important milestone in the timeline and history of amateur radio de-expedition. So thank you very much, and hopefully you have some questions for us.
Greg and Hal, thank you very much indeed. Well, that's certainly not what I expected with a rib, and that's a big box full of equipment. So I hope you've enjoyed that presentation at home, but of course we would welcome now your questions and your comments. We've only had one so far, but we hope that you've got many more. So I'm going to read that one to you both for the moment. This is from Roger G3LDI. What about bad weather protection for the gear?
So the ribs are weatherproof. They're watertight. If we were to be in a situation where we knew we'd have high winds, we could lash the equipment down and fasten them to the ground with tent stakes. There's two handles on each side and a handle on each end, so there's a total of 6 handles. And what we haven't deployed yet that we will be deploying is I think they call it space cloth. It's this like tarp-like material that has a metallic finish on it, aluminum-like finish. And we're going to make basically a cover that goes over the rib to reduce the solar heat loading. So that will also provide another level of resistance to weather.
Okay, good, thank you. And I guess as well, maybe other things like, even just having maybe a white case instead of the black one might help a bit with certainly some of the sun side of it, the heat. We've got another question. Roger actually he's added, are there any latency problems with RTTY, for example?
No, so the latency over the wireless bridge is just on the order of a few milliseconds. And we've tested some remote operating, but in the remote configuration, we have a PC inside the rib case, and we're running all the applications like MMTTY, we run locally to the rib, and then use a remote desktop application like AnyDesk to access the PC. So the latency is between the operator and the PC, and there's no additional latency between the applications and the radio. That's a good way to put it. And we have a solution that works for N1MM generating CW. We have a very robust audio solution. So I've made sideband QSOs from my home here in Georgia through the rib, sitting on an island in the Bahamas, and working on a paddle input CW solution as well. That I'm pretty confident that we can make it work, and it's basically because of the architecture of the audio solution that we are using.
Okay. Malcolm G3PDH now says, do you anticipate some of the operators working from their home QTH via Starlink, making even lower logistics cost on site?
That would be a wonderful experience. And certainly the technology is capable of it. I've done it myself. But is there a commitment to do that today? Not at this time, but we've certainly talked about it. And it is, one of the things about ham radio is you can't stop technology. You can't regulate it. You can't control it. A lot of people poo-pooed FT8 when it became popular. But, if you take a step back at what FT8's done for ham radio, it's enabled a whole nother audience of people who wouldn't be DXing if it wasn't for FT8. And it's gotten more people in the hobby. Those of you who are VHF enthusiasts who work 6 meters, It's 6 meters is turned into a different band because of FT8. The openings are much more robust, and the ability to work distance stations is much better. So, I mean, if the technology's there, I think, and, you know, there's no issues otherwise, I think that you'll see in the future that some DXpeditions will be supporting remote access for operators.
Okay, thank you. Paul SQ1NXQ says, do you have any backup supply in case the generators fail?
So we have spare generators. And each generator powers one rib. So if you had a single generator failure, you just lose one rib. And if you say you have 4 ribs, as in the model I presented, you would lose 25% of your capacity. If it's in the middle of the night, you probably don't have 4 bands that are open simultaneously anyway. So the diversity, because you have a one-to-one relationship with the ribs and the generators, you know, makes the solution robust against a single point of failure in the power system.
Okay. I mean, I guess solar is something that you maybe could consider.
We've done solar.
Good to supplement.
It's in the mix.
Yeah, I'm sure. Hal, I mean, a question for you, if I may.
Sure.
It might be a bit controversial, this, to some people, saying that it's spoiling maybe the spirit of it and some of the fun, even though the cost benefits are, you know, beyond any doubt. I mean, what do you say to that when people say, yeah, but it's not really a DXpedition then if you're not going to be on the island?
Well, you know, you bring up a good point, and it is something that the RSGB folks, I guess, with the sponsorship of IOTA, they would not recognize this as a valid contact for an IOTA award. But, you know, within the confines of the ARRL's DXCC program, it is within the scope of the rules. But as Greg alluded to, you know, the changing technology in our hobby has advanced us to this point. And, you know, the challenge, and for me, and this has kind of been the charge that I've been leading in my efforts to get to some of these places that we no longer have access to. You have to understand, we've got to look at new ways to do this. And if it means, you know, we don't go onto the island, or we can commit to U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service that, you know, all we need to do is set these on the island. We're not going to be camping. We're not going to be cooking. We're not going to be living. You know, we put this on, we minimize our footprint and include that in the application. I'm going to tell you, David, this is probably our last best hope. You know, personally, as somebody that's been involved in DXing long in my career, and I can speak for Greg as well, you know, it is getting harder and harder and harder for us to get to these places. And, you know, if we don't try to come up with some kind of alternative through the technology that we've got, you know, that you've seen today, then, you know, we can just kiss the DXCC program goodbye, because, as I said, you've got 22 entities on that top 25 list, and the chances of getting the permission, they all require permission. The chances of getting permission to go there and actually operate from that DXCC entity are getting less and less. There's less and less opportunity for us. Let's just put it that way. And so we have to do something. And this is just a tremendous opportunity before us, and hopefully it'll bear some fruit down the road.
And it's good hearing from you to say that, because I believe you've just come back from K7K DXpedition yourself. So you're still finding fun in doing this. So the challenges, I guess, of putting the technology together to make this, it's just as much of a challenge for you.
Oh, absolutely. Let me just a quick comment about that. I don't know how many the folks that are viewing worked K7K. But I want to go on record, as I've stated in a couple other forums, that was the most physically challenging expedition that I have experienced in my DXpeditioning/expeditioning career. This was everything that we did. You know, we had to take everything, as Greg showed there. We had to take it from a boat out in the Aleutian Islands, out in the Bering Sea, on a small skiff, and we made probably close to 25 to 30 trips from the vessel, which was anchored about 300 meters away from the shore. You know, the fortunate thing for us was it was a sandy beach. There was no coral, exposed coral heads there. There's no coral there, but it's just volcanic sand, if you will, and which, you know, made it a lot easier. And we were fortunate to be able to arrive on a good weather day with small breakers on the shore. And the day that we left, there were relatively small breakers, and so it is a challenge. And I would have liked to have had ribs set up on that island and operated from the boat we were on, but you know, we were there. That was an ODA expedition, so it wouldn't have counted.
Yeah, I mean, Andy M0NKR has just come on and said, so we need just one rib per DXCC to be deployed, to be solar powered and remote access, and then we can all get an honor roll, he said.
Yeah, that's a possibility, and we may see that at some point. So
by the way, he adds a PS saying that he worked K7K, so that's good.
All right, well, good. Congratulations.
Couple more questions for you. Roger G3LDI says, is Beauvais going to use ribs?
No, they will not be using ribs. They will be going on to the island as Greg and I and the other 18 operators attempted to do in 2018. And I'm just hoping that these guys are successful with their attempt with the 3Y0J.
Yeah, let's hope they will. It's one that our club supported, actually, the expedition. So let's hope that happens this time. And also, Malcolm G3PDH says, amazing to keep all that equipment within temperature in a sealed box. What's the maximum temperature it can handle?
Greg?
Probably internal temperatures around 60 C. We've seen higher, and so we're making improvements to try and get it a little cooler inside the box. It's something that we're constantly working on. We're not generating a lot of heat from the radio because the radio is only running at 10 watts instead of 100 watts. The heat from the amplifier is moved through direct heat exchange through the cooler that's attached to the copper spreader. So it's working very, very well. But again, you're going out someplace where failures have to be minimized, and so we're taking every step that we see to make the solution as robust, as reliable as possible.
Okay, good. Malcolm, by the way, adds a PS. I'm not volunteering to be on the boat off P5, is what he says as well at the end of there. So he's our president of the club. Guys, many, many thanks for tonight. I mean, I really wasn't quite sure what to expect. I'm sure many others as well with this. And because it sounds so simple, as you say, many people have go boxes, and maybe one for a DXpedition is just a bit scaled up a bit. But clearly, the technology and everything involved is much greater. And it's another way of challenging our hobby, I guess, and our engineering expertise as part of that hobby as well. So good luck to both of you for continuing with this RIB technology. It sounds wonderful. And many thanks for giving us the presentation tonight.
Okay, you're welcome. Yeah, thank you for allowing us the opportunity. And we'll say 73. Hope to work you guys. If you see or hear C6AGU on the air, in all likelihood it's being operated from a rib. And so give them a QSO, and you can say you worked a rib. All right, good.
Hal and I are taking off next month to spend a week on Svalbard, so look for us as JW5E in the third week of September.
Okay, good. Well, you're having lots of fun and using lots of technology as well. Once again, guys, many, many thanks to Greg and to Hal. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
There we are. What an interesting talk. Really was, and lots of people putting lovely comments as well for the guys as well. Thank you very much indeed to them. So just a quick look back at what's happening this week in the club. On Sunday, the GB2RS News, as always, at 7 o'clock on GB3MB. Monday night on GB3MB also, the Monday Night Net at 7:30, and at 8:30, the 80 metre CW Net on 3.543 megahertz. Then next Wednesday, the 24th of August, we're back to a social informal meeting at the school, CNS, and the study hall. By the way, that's just parking in the usual place, but going into the main school building instead of our usual bit. And then finally, in 2 weeks' time from here, we'll be back here on NARC Live for an online talk on ham radio deluxe. Don't forget to keep those stories coming in and any of those useful little gadgets, or maybe not so useful little gadgets and things to fox everybody at home for what on earth, and all of the other news and everything to keep in touch with us. And also SSB Field Day, as Andy put on there. You know, we've got all these people in our club now. Sorry, I've been besieged with flies here. And so please do help us with SSB Field Day if you can. And you'll get a lot from it as well. It's a lovely challenge and a really nice thing to work for. And also maybe I'll work you in the next few days for GB100 BBC. Just 2 more days. If you'd like to be worked on that, and if you want a particular frequency or a time or something to suit you, we'll try and sort that out as well, because that was what it was all about, bringing it to Norfolk. But that's it, apart from see some of you maybe at Haysborough Lighthouse this weekend. But for now, from Tammy M0TC.
Bye-bye.
And from me, David G7RP. Thanks for joining us. Take care of yourselves and look after each other. Bye-bye.